So I already got some questions from you with people who are really worried about this project number three. It's like, oh wow, we need to come with our own research questions. We need to do our own data collection. We need to do our own data analysis. We need to write a whole manuscript. And my reply is absolutely not. The task is a lot simpler and I think more fun than you perhaps were led to believe just by reading the syllabus. So I want to clarify a few things. Plus, I want us to train ourselves and do some activities today in class in order for you to feel a little bit what this project 3 will look like. But first, a clarification. You do not need to do any data collection in this class. So whatever we design together as an experiment, I will give you a template for this. I will show you a lot of examples. Everything is going to be very simple and clear on how you do your hypotheses. Once you decide what your hypotheses are, you send those to me and I use my research budget in order to collect the data for you, for us. So I run this online with an online labor market called Prolific. So I pay participants in order to test our hypothesis. Not only this, but I also analyze this for you. So at the end, you will receive your data with the analysis, nice plot, and a statistical test. What will be left for you to do is take those statistical tests, interpret them, and then write a summary. What worked, to what extent, what can we gain from this, what to do with this, that kind of thing. So basically, I take away all of the gray, hard work, all the stuff that people usually don't like to mess around with. The statistics are super easy. It's basically a one sample t-test. It doesn't get much easier than this. We'll see some examples today. You'll see just how easy this is. The design is very straightforward. There's only one way to do this kind of design. So there's not many ways for you to go wrong, but there are many ways for you to gain additional insights, to try something new, to let your imagination go free, and then maybe also have a contribution. So I'll give you an example of how the students from last year actually did things that were very, very meaningful. So I presented this to Effective Altruism Hong Kong, and I showed them some of the insights. I shared this with some of the Effective Altruism community. So the community overall, both the academic one and the effective altruism one, gained a lot from the hypothesis that student had in this classroom. I'm going to also show you Manix. Manix was a student here 2 years ago. So he attended my courses. He decided that he wants to do more good and do good better. So he came up to me and he said, can I do a thesis about this? I said, I would love to. So we picked out a classic, which has this very interesting design. And he submitted this as a register report and did very well with this. So a lot that we can learn from Manix. And in addition to this, he did a tutorial for you. So you can hear from Manix how to do this. Very straightforward, step by step. Plus, he also gave an HKU brown bag. So if you want to see how a student like yourself summarizes this whole thing, so you can look at that. So all of this is laid out on the syllabus. So I basically wrote this out for you about what happened. What is this classic that Manix was trying to replicate? So it's this 2010 book chapter. John Barron is one of our most prominent members of Judgment Decision Making. He is the editor of this journal called Judgment and Decision Making. So he wrote this in 2011. It's the classic. It's the first one that tried to map out cognitive biases in the way that people think about charity. So today, this is going to be our topic. What is it that people actually do when they think about charity? How do we make the decision of which charity to go for? And how, maybe, this can go wrong? So how can we help people to understand that they're making the wrong decision? So there's a big group, Effective Altruism, that's trying to do more in order to educate people about this. Peter Singer is the mind that got us started thinking about effectiveness and why we have these biases where we help somebody who's next to us, but we don't notice all these starving children around the world, and why people don't take this more into consideration in their everyday lives. So generally, when we think about how to do charity, let's say that I'm convinced by Peter Singer. Okay, Peter, great. I want to do some charity. I'm convinced that I'm going to take, I don't know, 10% of my salary, or I'm going to, if I'm wealthy, I'm going to take some of my family wealth. And I'm going to give this to charity. Then comes the hard question of which charity, which cause? So many out there. How do you even start to do this kind of thing? So let's say that you're in the US and you go to our website and you look at all the registered charities. Turns out that there's 1.5 million of these things. So yeah, good. How to make a decision. So if you donate some money to one charity, then you don't donate money to a different charity. We only have so much money and we can't give to 1.5 million charities. And we need to make some priorities. So we have an opportunity cost. We need to select charity A, charity B. How do we make this kind of decision? And it turns out we need social psychologists in order to help us understand how people think about this. And when we start looking at this, and this is a very new area of research, we realize that we don't have good tools for this. So actually, following up on Peter Singer, some hedge fund managers were convinced by what Peter Singer was saying. And because they've made hundreds of millions of dollars, they said, okay, now we're going to give hundreds of millions of dollars to charity. Who are we going to give this to? So they sat on the phone, started calling up charities, starting from Red Cross, Save the Child, so forth, and saying, okay, if we give you $1 million now, what are you going to do with it? Can you please give us how many lives are you going to save? What's going to happen per dollar that I spent with you? How much are you going to use this in what way? And what's going to be the outcome? And charities, turns out, the charities don't know how to answer these kinds of questions. So a lot of charities like Red Cross, like Save the Child, basically say, I am the Red Cross. You need to trust me. I know what I'm doing. I don't have the numbers that you're looking for. I don't know exactly how much per dollar spent. How many lives are you going to save, or how much better somebody's life is going to be, how much longer, so forth. So they decided to come up with an organization called GiveWell, which is now handling a few billion every year. So GiveWell decided that they're going to do the impossible. They're going to try and rank the charities on how much good they're doing. And this is a very difficult task. So 2 years ago, when I started doing this, doing more good, doing good better in advanced social psychology, the task that I gave the students was to go and learn what GiveWell is doing. GiveWell has every year a competition where they pay $500 just for participating. If you have a critique on how they do moral weights, how they translate what a charity is doing to what actually happens in how they show up in the Google sheet, and how much weight they give each charity and how the performance is, then you give them this kind of feedback and they aim to learn from that. And if you find some major mistakes, they will even compensate you. So at the end of the competition, the big winner is about $20,000, second place $10,000. So you can win good money by telling GiveWell how to improve the way that they do moral weights and how to compare different charities. GiveWell came out with a comparison to try and understand what is the opportunity cost. So if I go to help one charity, is it really that bad? Perhaps it's not much different than going to a different charity. So what are the differences between the different charities? So when you start to map this out and you do all kinds of surveys to try and understand how people do charity, you realize some really interesting things. So for example, here, we're going to talk about this article here. So most people think that most charities are about the same. So if I go to Red Cross, or I go to Save the Child, or I go to something about animal welfare, it's not that different. As long as I did some good, that's what matters. There's no really opportunity cost, because all charities are about the same. However, in reality, when we start to map this out and we ask experts, like in GiveWell, and we look at their equations, actually we realize that the best charities are not 2 times more, 2 times better. Actually, they're 10 times to 100 times better than the lowest performing charities. So if there's this big misalignment between what people think and what is in reality, then we need to educate people in order for them to understand that if they're choosing the wrong charities, actually, they're preventing themselves from doing more good. So it's a little bit like you have the opportunity to save that girl in South America, but you don't know how to best do this. So you need us social psychologists, or you need GiveWell, or you need other organizations in order to help people to overcome some of these biases. So that's the purpose of the third task that you have. We need to come up with some hypotheses in order to understand how people look at charity A versus charity B, in order to understand, is there some misalignment? Is there something that's not optimized there? In addition, it's very likely that people have cognitive biases and they don't understand and they make mistakes, because only a third of the people do any kind of research about the charities that they donate to. How do we usually donate to charity? Somebody stops us in the street, maybe when we go to a temple or we go to a church, or if some family member knows of something and asks us to donate, then we donate, right? So it has to do more with people that we know, the people that we love, the way that people communicate to us, the people who request this from us, then we donate to their cause. But it could very well be that there's a different way to do this. Maybe I can help more people if I take exactly the same amount of money and I donate it somewhere else. So at the very least, you would expect people would do some research, right? When you invest in a bank, maybe not at your stage in life, but maybe your parents are doing this. Maybe later on, when you graduate, you have a good salary. You'll need to decide, where do I want to invest my money? So you don't do this based on word of mouth. You don't do this without any information. You want to go. You want to search these kind of things. You want people to tell you with some authority where to look, what to do, and how to best make this the kind of decision. But a third doing any research, that's not good. So we're missing out on some information. Plus, when people do kind of research, it seems like they emphasize the wrong things. So at least with financial decision making, When it comes to the bank, maybe you have some decisions. For example, you don't want to support casinos, for example. So you say this no, this no, this no. But after you ruled out all the things that you don't support, then the thing you want to maximize is how much money you're going to gain, right? So according to risk, if I'm in risk category 3, whatever, I want to maximize how much money I'm going to make. It's a lot more difficult when we talk about charities because there's so many different causes. There's so many other things in the world that we need to better to do improve. So this is kind of like a summary of what's happening with charitable giving around the world. How much money is out there? So this is a little bit outdated. This is from 2008, but this is the best that I could find in like this a very nice figure. Let's say 2008, like 15 years ago or so. This is what happened with donations, and we're talking about billions of dollars. So we can see over here that individual donations, and this comes from people like us, not organizations or not governments. We have about $229 billion. Then we've got all these foundations and the charitable bequests and corporate giving and all of that. These are like smaller numbers. Then you might ask yourself, who are these 229 billion US dollars? Where is this coming from? Is it really from our pockets, from the middle class folks? So not all of it. Much of it comes from all the Warren Buffetts and the Bill Gates and all those. So 115 comes from those. Then you've got the wealthy people who make more than 80K a year in the US. So you've got another 57 middle class and all that. It's about $57 billion, which is still very substantial. So if there's something that we can do so that these $57 billion can gain better effectiveness of times 10 or times 100, then we really want to help people make another better decision than that. Yeah. So how much research do people do? You can see over here, only about 35% ever do any kind of research. How much research are they doing in terms of minutes? So you can see most people spend under an hour, 14% and 34%. And then people who really look into what to invest in, spending more than 6 hours, it's very low. It's about 10%. What are they basing themselves at? They're basing themselves at mostly on facts and figures. So when you did your first assignment and you wrote this book about how people process information, people tend to go with the things that are easy to process. So figures is one of those. Facts are actually okay as long as it's tied to some scientific evidence where there's something backing this up. So we want to understand these facts and figures. Where are they coming from? Is this a trustworthy source? Is this something that we can all rely on? So you can see most of the facts and figures come from the organization website. So for example, I want to know how good Red Cross is. I go to the Red Cross website. And obviously, this is a little bit of a problem. This is not something that you can rely on because Red Cross obviously has some incentive in order to get you to donate to them, right? So this is not the best source. What else? Employees of this charity, maybe also not a good source. I'm very biased. A friend or family member, maybe not the most knowledgeable. And then all kinds like searches and emails and all that stuff. All this does not seem like credible evidence, right? So if you go back to the book that you wrote together in the first assignment, there are much better ways of doing search. When you look at information, you want to know how credible it is. You shouldn't go to any of these sources, but these are the facts and figures that people usually use for the charity. It's not just because this is what we prefer, but sometimes it's because we don't have any other sources of information. If you want to know something about Red Cross, we probably don't have a good source of information other than their website or other than word of mouth or other than somebody recommending this to us. Because charities are not used to being transparent and telling us what it is that they do and how they use their money. Why do people give? What is it that caused them to give? So this is a big one. Cause impacted me or a loved one. So somebody in the family had cancer or is affected by some kind of a disease. Maybe they're blind, they need a guide dog or something like that. Then you see a problem in your immediate family or a close one, and then you say, okay, this is an important cause to me. I don't want other people to suffer from this, or I want to help my loved one. Therefore, so 38% is are people in that category. But then you've got all sorts of other things. 65% faith-based. So looking at each one of these categories, it seems like there are all kinds of different things that are not completely aligned with scientific evidence and effectiveness. So fit with religious beliefs. I don't know if this is the most good that you can do per the dollar spent and so forth. Familiar, friend and family ask me, all the ties, all these different things. So this is a little bit problematic because it shows us that people use very biased sources in order to make a decision of whether to donate and how to donate. So just generally overall, it does seem like people don't really know how to do charitable giving very well. And GiveWell, one of the things that they did is that they decided they need to overcome some of these challenges. So they need to give people tools by a trusted third party in order to evaluate the charities and understand better how they operate. This is one of the big academic papers that came out that allowed us to understand that there is an issue here and that people don't understand just how much good they're losing by not investing in the right charities. So I'll just zoom in on this because it's a little bit small and there is a little bit of text in there. So first I'll say Lucius is one of the prominent members of effective altruism movement. Next week, we're going to talk about one of the amazing initiatives that he did based on work that came out in social psychology, trying to understand how people make comparisons about charity, called Giving Multiplier. They did this he was a postdoc or a PhD at the time. He was trying to do something in order to demonstrate some effects in psychology about how people choose charities, but it ended up being really a good tool that processes tens of millions of dollars. So Giving Multiplier, he was able to help people to really multiply their impact. So he has done a lot of good in the world, and he translates between academic research and real life impact within the effective altruism movement. Spencer Greenberg has a really nice podcast, Clearer Thinking, has a lot of great tools. He's an entrepreneur, and he tries to help effective altruism in academics, not by being an academic, by being an entrepreneur. So he builds tools in order to help people do more good in the world. A lot of other people that I know, so Nadira and Stefan, big names, early career researchers, but big names in the effective altruism movement who are academics. So doing some amazing research about what is it that we can do in order to increase effectiveness. So I'll just show you from here what the conclusions are. So I'll just read it to you. People underestimate just how much more effective some charities are compared with the average charity. So they did 4 different studies. 2 studies were with simple people, study 1 and study 2. And they found that people estimated that most charities helping the global poor, the most effective charities are 1.5 times. So that beautiful figure that you saw with the 4 boxes and the red one, it's based on this reading. So, this article. So 1.5 is based on us asking people to compare different charities, and then people think that the best charity and the worst charity is just like 1.5 times better in terms of effectiveness. And then they went to effective altruists. So these are people who are really trying to do the most good in the world. People are going to show up on Friday to Peter Singer's talk, and they asked them what do you think the difference is? How much of a difference is there between choosing the worst and the best? So they say a factor of 30. So this is the study 3, and then they asked experts. So people like the folks who work in GiveWell, or people who actually understand the charities and work from within and evaluate the charities, and they say that it's up to a factor of 100. So it seems to be a big gap. Even effective altruists who are a little bit less biased than the general public seem to be underestimating this. So there's a very big underestimation of these effects. So sometimes the way that you can increase the good in the world is not necessarily that you need to donate more. You can donate the same amount of money that you've always donated. It's just a matter of maximizing how you donate, to which charities you donate, how you make that kind of impact. So a very interesting paper that came out in 2020 in the journal Judgment and Decision Making, and really shifted our mind in trying to understand some of the cognitive biases. So when it comes to how people make decisions, what is it that they focus on? So it seems like one of the things that they focus on is all the wrong things. So for example, if we have one charity that has a very large overhead means that they have a lot of bureaucracy, they have a lot of managers, they need to pay a lot for the basic everyday life kind of thing. So people don't like to donate money to just a functioning of a bureaucracy. They don't like charities that require a lot of money in order to operate. So you need to reduce overhead as much as possible if you want to get more donations from people. Problem is that most times we don't even know how much overhead there is because many of the charities don't report this. So one of the things that GiveWell asks of the charities in terms of transparency is what is it that they use, how much money they use for what kind of cause, and how much of this is overhead. In addition, there's this thing about the difference between efficiency and effectiveness. So it could be some charities that are very efficient. For example, and you'll see in a second a guy called Luke talking about this. So there's this charity that gives massages to billionaires. So if you donate to this charity, you can sponsor a 1-hour massage to a billionaire. You can ask yourself, it's a very efficient charity because the money is really going to a massage. No problem about that. You'll know that the billionaire is going to get the massage, but the question at the end is this effective? Is this helping the world? How much good is there in the world on doing this? Some people compare this to the Trump administration plan on reducing taxes for the wealthy. There's no doubt that this is going to help the wealthy. How much good is there from that for the rest of the world? So it's a whole debate about this. So you want to focus not only just on efficiency, but also on effectiveness, on when you donate $1, how many lives are going to be saved, or how much better our lives going to be as a result of this. So You need to look at cost effectiveness, but also about how much good you can do in the world beyond the costs. So what is it that the charity is actually doing at the end? So I'm going to introduce Luke to you. Luke is actually has sponsored my courses a few times. So in the last 2 years, he has given us hundreds of dollars that I gave to students that were donated at the end. He was a CEO of Giving What We Can. I think he stepped down. Somebody else is going to come in after 4 years. And he's an amazing communicator. So one of the things that Giving What We Can does is that it sponsors giving games. At HKU, we have a group running around who they do giving games, and basically they give each participant $10 to decide which charity they want to give this to. So we sit together, and this is what we've done in the last 2 years. We sit together and we discuss what is the best charity, what is the most effective charity to donate to. And then finally, based on our decision, we tell Luke, and Luke donates this to the charity, and then he says, okay, on your behalf, this is your donation. We donate it to that kind of charity. So they do a lot of cool things. This is one of many things that they do, the giving game. They also communicate to help others, to help the public understand how to donate better. So I'm going to show you a video. It's about 8 minutes long. Based on this video, we're going to do a class exercise. The class exercise is supposed to simulate what you might be doing in your third task. So our purpose, our intent, is to try and compare two types of charities. Just like you saw the opportunity cost, should I press charity B or should I press charity A? We want to compare different charities on one aspect. So in the task, in the third task that we have, the main task is to come up with different factors that charities might differentiate on. So I'll show you how Menix did this, but basically you have two charities that are the same about everything. They do everything about the same. Their effectiveness is about the same, but they differ on one factor. So for example, one has higher overhead than the other. Their effectiveness is the same, the amount of money, the number of lives saved is the same, everything is the same, but one has more overhead, spends more on bureaucracy and managerial than the other. Which one would you choose? And then what we can see is that most people would choose the one without the overhead or with less overhead. So our task is to identify as many factors as possible, like overhead, based on videos like Luke's, or based on the books that previous years wrote, or based on your intuitions, or based on your discussions with your family. So as we're going through this video, I will stop occasionally and I will tell you, okay, so this is a factor. Okay, so this is a factor. Perhaps as you're listening to this, you'll see other factors that I'm not discussing. So all this will serve you in the task that we're going to do together in the second half of this session. Okay? So the title is How to Find the Highest Impact Charities. Let's move this to the side.
You donate? Most people don't seem to think so, estimating that the best charities are only 1.5 to 2 times better than an average charity. However, the difference is much more astounding than that. Some charities are tens, hundreds, or even thousands of times more effective than others. We live in an unprecedented time where you have an astonishing opportunity to improve the world through charitable donations. However, where you donate really matters. As individuals, we all have limited resources. If you'd like to maximize the impact of your donations, it's vital to find and support the most cost-effective organizations. G'day folks, welcome back to Giving What We Can, where we look at how to maximize a charitable impact. In this video, we look at how to evaluate charities based on their effectiveness, and then stay tuned for some shortcuts to help you quickly find outstanding charities to support. In this video, we're assuming that you've already narrowed down on a cause area to support. If you haven't already done so, I recommend that you first watch our video on choosing a cause, which goes through how to match your values and resources to what the world needs. A quick recap on cause prioritization. The rule of thumb for finding the most impactful causes is to find causes working on problems that are large in scale, have
When we focus, so effective altruism does a lot of different things, and you have charities that are focusing on many different domains. But one of the things is mapping out how they differentiate and what is it that we should focus on. So bigger in scale, tractable, and then neglectedness. So all these are different factors. So for example, it could be that there's one charity, so two charities, they're as effective, everything is about the same, but charity A focuses on something that all other charities focus on. So for example, poverty and health. But charity B focuses on something that is neglected, that nobody else addresses. Which one would you prefer? Would you prefer to invest in something that everybody else is investing, or would you rather to invest in something that's neglected? In terms of scale, do you want the bigger scale issues or do you want the smaller scale issues? So he's mapping out different factors that you should think about when it comes to the different domains of charitable giving.
Tractable solutions, or at least a way forward, and are relatively neglected. They have a clear need for more funding. After choosing a promising cause to support, we're ready to select an outstanding charity working in that area. To ensure that every donation does as much good as possible, it's important to support charities that are cost effective. In other words, we should try to determine which charities can accomplish the most good with the resources that we give them. We want the best bang for our charitable buck. These charities are likely to be ones with strong evidence, cost effectiveness, and room for more funding.
Yeah, so this is very important. So one other thing that you can compare the different charities on is just how transparent they are. Is there high transparency or low transparency? So they could be doing exactly the same kind of good in the world, but one of them is a lot more transparent than the other. Which one would people rather invest in, right? So cost effectiveness is another thing. So all these factors are things that we should take into consideration in order to understand how people do this on a large scale.
Let's go through these one at a time. One good indication that a charity will use a donation effectively is that effectiveness is part of their mission and/or strategy. Charities that are focused on effectiveness are more likely to run programs that are supported by evidence and strong reasoning. They will run regular evaluations of their own programs and organization, and they will adapt if necessary in response to what they learn.
So the nice thing about GiveWell is not only does it invite feedback and not only does it pay people in order to criticize it, but every year at the end of the year, they actually say how they've implemented that feedback and they change the rankings of the charities based on that feedback. So you know exactly that they're open in order to be criticized. They endorse and accept the mistakes that they've done, and they try to improve every year. One of the things that you might be thinking about, so this is a possibility for cognitive biases, is to compare different charities on how many mistakes they make. The thing about mistake is that it's a very elusive thing to try and compare charities about. Because if you think about it, if you present this to somebody in the street and you say, charity A reported 50 mistakes and charity B reported 5 mistakes, which one would you prefer? And it seems like there's a little bit of potential for a little bit of a bias over there. Because some of these charities that are very, very transparent, and they open up people in order to invite them to say they have feedback on mistakes, and they learn from the mistakes, and they improve on these mistakes, actually might find out that they have more mistakes. Those that are not transparent do not have a lot of feedback. They don't improve from this. They don't learn from this, and therefore they don't report a lot of mistakes. Therefore, a little bit like with crime. So for example, sometimes we see an increase of crime because something changed. And people see, oh, you see what's happening? Because we did this, because there's more of that, then there's more crime. But sometimes higher reporting of crime actually indicates that people are cracking down on crime a little bit more strongly. So the increase in catching the crime leads to higher reporting of crime. Yesterday, I gave a talk in Lingnan University about open science. And somebody came to me and says, you know, now there's so many retractions of academic journals. There's like 50,000 only just this year, only from this publisher, MDPI. So it seems like people are misbehaving more. And my response to this is, up until now, nobody ever checked scientific articles. So for the first time, somebody is checking it. Therefore, we find more mistakes. Therefore, we're retracting more. So one of the things that you can consider, and one possible cognitive bias, is how many mistakes are reported, whether there's transparency, and how they learn from these kinds of things. So these kinds of charities really care about evidence. They really care about learning. They really care about getting feedback. And they really care about scientific evidence based on randomized control trials and the best scientific evidence that's possible. So that's one thing that I think a lot of people don't emphasize when they look at charities. How much are they science-based? Is what they're doing really helping? How do we know that it's helping?
If a charity is making all these efforts to ensure the effectiveness of their work, you can be reasonably confident that any donations to them will be put to good use. A good way to learn about a charity's attitudes towards effectiveness is on their website's About page. For instance, the Good Food Institute's About GFI page makes several references to effectiveness evidence and doing the most good we can. They even provide a theory of change, which explains the ways in which their programs are expected to have an impact. Charities that select their programs based on evidence will generally be happy to provide that evidence to potential donors. It should be easy to find references to research and data in the charity's communications. Of course, there are different types of evidence, which vary in terms of their strength, generalizability, and availability. The following types of evidence are listed roughly in descending order of strength: meta-analyses and systematic reviews, individual scientific studies, especially randomized controlled trials, expert opinions, historical evidence, logic and reasoning, and case studies, anecdotes, and personal stories.
What I like about this is that they're taking the scientific approach in order to apply this to charity. So if you want to know whether something is really happening, something is really helping the world in terms of health, of alleviating from poverty, if addressing some urgent thing like climate change, then we need the best scientific evidence. So they look at this just like we wrote in our the first project, the book that we wrote today, how to search for information. If I have a piece of information, how do I know whether this is credible or not? So looking at scientific evidence that has to do with meta-analysis, has to do with randomized control trials, this is how you evaluate information in order to know whether this is reliable or not.
In general, it's best to support charities whose activities are supported by multiple different types of evidence. When evidence from different streams converge to support the same claim, that evidence is collectively more robust than individual pieces of evidence. One example of self-reflection and agility is Evidence Action's 2019 decision to end one of its programs. They gathered enough evidence to determine that the cost of the program was too high relative to its impact, and they knew that they had other, more cost-effective opportunities. They made a public announcement that they would end their less effective program in order to direct more resources towards their most effective programs.
So another factor is about how much they learn and how much they update. Some charities just keep giving the same thing all the time, year after year. Maybe they did research 10 years ago, but they haven't updated this research. So a charity that keeps updating its research and based on this making a decision sometimes to withdraw from one area and invest in another area is a very important thing. So self-learning. So you can imagine charity A does not have self-learning, does not have improvement, does not do new research compared to charity B that does. That's another factor.
Look for signs that a charity regularly evaluates itself and makes appropriate changes over time. Some effective charities like GiveWell and Animal Charity Evaluators will keep public records of mistakes they've made or changes they've implemented. Such lists of mistakes should be understood as positive or neutral reflections on the organisation, not negative ones. After all, every organisation makes mistakes. The important thing is that the organisation should be able to realise its mistakes, fix them, and be transparent with donors. Cost effectiveness is the measure of how much it takes in resources to achieve a desired outcome. In theory at least, you can calculate a charity's cost effectiveness by adding up everything the charity will achieve with its resources, its benefits, adding up all of the costs incurred by the charity to do this, its costs, and then dividing the benefits by the costs. In practice, however, calculating a charity's cost effectiveness is typically quite complicated. It's not always easy to measure or quantify the charity's benefits and costs, especially when you're looking at what the next dollar might get you, not just what things cost in the past. You've probably heard the statement, past performance is no guarantee of future results, spoken quickly at the end of ads for financial products. The same is true for charities. When estimating cost effectiveness, you need to combine the best evidence from the past with rational expectations of what the future might look like. Imagine that you're trying to determine which of two charities is more cost effective based on historical data. Both charities have similar programs. They both save lives by administering healthcare. You've added up all the lives that each charity has saved, all the costs incurred by each charity, and you've divided each charity's benefits, measured in lives saved, by its costs, measured in dollars. If you simply compare charity A to charity B without doing a cost effectiveness calculation, you would immediately notice that charity A has saved more lives. However, when you calculate cost effectiveness, it becomes clear that charity B is the more cost-effective charity. Charity A saves 2 lives per $10,000, whereas charity B saves 5 lives per $10,000.
So this is a really important point because a lot of charities just focus on the bottom line of, let's say, if they have any numbers regarding how many lives they've saved, they usually just report that and not necessarily the costs. So it's not the cost effectiveness, it's just the overall number of lives saved. But because these are very big charities, then actually they might be less cost effective than some of the smaller charities that do more per buck spent. So this kind of analysis is something that we don't often see when we let people make decisions about charity. So a lot of people just Google or look up stuff about total life saved for that charity per year. So this is something very important that we can do and use in an experiment. So you can manipulate this. You can run each one of those as a factor, and then you can see whether people shift their decision from, if we compare charity A, charity B only on total life saved, or whether we compare charities on cost effectiveness, whether people will shift. And very likely that if provided with this information, that they will use it.
All else being equal, it is more cost-effective to give money to charity B. Though it has saved fewer lives overall than charity A, it saves lives more cost-effectively. Two charities that work towards the same goal, such as saving lives, are relatively easy to compare. However, two charities that help people in different ways can be difficult to compare. Suppose you're trying to compare charity C, which provides massages to millionaires, and charity D, which distributes insecticide-treated bed nets to children in low-income countries. Simply comparing the number of outcomes that each charity achieves per dollar would be misleading in this case. Charity C achieves 0.1 outcomes per dollar, or put another way, it costs them $100 to achieve an outcome, whereas charity D, on the other hand, only achieves 0.05 outcomes per dollar, or $200 to achieve one outcome. If charity C and D were both producing the same outcome, charity C would be the more cost-effective option. However, they're producing very different outcomes. It costs charity C $100 to give a millionaire a massage for an hour, where it costs $200 for charity D to prevent a case of malaria. If you had $200 to donate, would it be better spent at charity C, giving 2 millionaires a massage, or charity D, preventing one case of malaria? Of course, I think that preventing malaria would be a much better use of your donation. Comparing charities can be like comparing apples and oranges. It isn't always easy, and there aren't perfect ways of making decisions, but there are some useful approaches. One way of comparing charities with different outcomes is to create an equation to convert different outcome measures to a third common measure. For instance, the charity evaluator GiveWell evaluates charities that create several kinds of outcomes, such as lives saved, increased consumption, and years of healthy life. To compare the cost effectiveness of different kinds of charities, GiveWell compares each charity's cost effectiveness to a single measure, the cost effectiveness of simply giving cash to people in need.
This is really interesting. This is a big decision by GiveWell, and I think it really paid off. That they decided our benchmark is going to be Give Directly. So Give Directly is based on randomized controlled trials that have shown and led to an economics Nobel Prize, showing that actually if you give cash to people, they know what to do with it. And they do this much better than what we think that we can do, the good that they can do with it. So for example, if we come from a Western high-income country, and we say, we think that people in Africa or South America, they need toilets. They should build toilets based on that dollar. But In a randomized control trial, they would give some people toilets, and then we compare this to just giving people the cash directly, and then seeing the impact on the village, the impact on economics, the impact on survival, the impact on medical care. And basically, they've shown that sometimes, in most times, especially when it comes to these kinds of charities, give directly does much better than us trying to intervene with what we think are preconceived notions of what we think that they need. So give directly is already very good. People don't use this for alcohol. They don't use this for drugs. They don't have a problem in misappropriating this for some other things. They actually know what it is that they need and they invest in this. So give directly is the benchmark. It's the factor of one. But some charities that they come into GiveWell and say, GiveWell, can you give me some money? They say, okay, please run your randomized control trial against Give Directly. So at least one condition needs to be Give Directly, where you just hand out cash to people. If you're able to demonstrate that your impact is a few times more than Give Directly, then we will sponsor you. And then they created this rank. It's amazing to see what these ranks are. But for example, the War in the World is like 29 times more effective than giving people cash directly. So even when you give cash directly, there are some inefficiencies in there. So sometimes people focus on what it is that they need, or sometimes they focus on the short term. But things like malaria, mosquito nets fighting against malaria, or deworming, in order to make sure that the children are healthy and they can go to school and they can prosper and grow up. So sometimes that requires a kind of planning that when you come in, you can provide them with vaccinations, with treatments, with everything else. So it's amazing to see how they run these randomized controlled trials, the kind of evidence that they have in order to come up with this kind of ranking. And each one of those is with a Google sheet that you can go and you can visit on their website in order to see how they do this kind of thing. And if you see something that is off, it's not the best scientific evidence, something that you think that can be improved, then you can write to GiveWell in order for them to improve how they do this for the next year.
GiveWell uses some complex formulas and value judgments to convert outcomes like lives saved into an equivalent amount of cash given. These calculations aren't perfect, but they can be very helpful in comparing different interventions and charities. In this example from GiveWell, donating to deworm the world is estimated to be about 29 times more effective than giving cash to people in need. When you compare charities that you're interested in supporting, you may need to think further about how different outcomes compare to each other. For instance, if you're interested in comparing animal charities to human-focused charities, you might need to think about how the value of a farmed animal's life compares to the value of a human life. If you're interested in comparing a charity focused on the future to a charity working to help people today, you might need to think about how to value your great-great-granddaughter's life compared to the value of a life today.
So another thing that you can do, the kinds of charities that you can compare, is like one charity, for example, has helps one person with $1,000 compared to, let's say, 10 animals or 100 animals or 1,000 animals. And this is how you can weigh also how people think about the comparisons between a human life and an animal life. Some say that we perhaps need to think about future generations. There's so many people in the future. Right now in the world, there's a certain amount of, but the endless future of humanity, hopefully, that will keep staying around, has a lot more people than that. So you can emphasize, one charity emphasizes the here and now and the people that are living right now on the planet. Charity B looks at the longer term, what's happening in the next generation, with all the risks and the uncertainties about that. So you can manipulate a lot of these things with the simple comparisons between charity A and charity B. So using a lot of these kinds of comparisons allows us to understand the psychology of how people think about the comparisons of doing good now versus the future, animals versus humans, and so forth.
There are no clear answers to these questions, but some lines of reasoning are going to be much better than others. You shouldn't just look for charities that have been cost effective in the past. You should look for charities that will be cost effective in the future, particularly with the use of your donation. To determine whether a charity will be as cost effective in the future as it has been in the past, you should consider how much need the charity has for more funding. If the charity has recently pioneered a new and highly cost-effective program, but the program has not received significant attention or funds, then it could be an ideal giving opportunity. If, on the other hand, a cost-effective charity is already well-known and well-funded, your donation may not make that much of a difference, particularly if the charity already has a large budget and your donation is relatively small.
All right, so we're going to stop here. We've heard enough from Luke. I think you got the idea of a lot of different factors which we can compare charities on. So I'll give you a chance for you to sit together with a group and think about some of these factors to map those out in a discussion. But before I do this, I'm going to show you how we did this experimentally in Mannix's thesis and last year with advanced social psychology students and kind of insights that we aim to gain from that. But before we go into all of that, I'm going to give you a 5-minute break. So go refresh yourself, come back, and I'll show you some of the stuff that we've done. 5 minutes. Okay, so I think it's time for us to continue. So I'll just introduce you to what I did with Manix. So here you can see that Manix decided to do a replication and extension of a classic chapter. It's a book chapter by Baron and Simanska. And this was published in 2011. I think this marked the beginning of the psychology of charitable giving. So Manix came in and say, okay, so I want to map out, I want to do a replication of all the studies that are in there, but I also want to introduce new extensions. So here you'll see that these factors, perceived waste, past costs, in-group, out-group, diversification, all these already appeared in the book chapter, but then Manix added two more factors that had to do with anonymity and paid for overhead. So what we did in this replication is that he wrote this as a registered report. Full transparency, we submitted this to peer community and registered report. We got the stage one in principle acceptance or an endorsement. And only after that, we went and collected the data. And once we analyzed everything and we wrote everything up, we submitted this back again. And then we got the stage two endorsement. So this means that this is a guaranteed publication done as a registered report by an undergraduate student here at HKU. So it's really nice to see how everything worked out. And then you can also go and look at all the peer review and the kind of feedback that we received. So it was a good back and forth and a lot of constructive criticism that we got from the reviewers in order to improve this. I also want to say that aside from doing a tutorial for you, Manix also gave HKU seminar in a brown bag. So if you want to go and look at that, you can check out that YouTube. If you want to see me present this to Effective Altruism Hong Kong last December, and this is my talk. Not a must, just if it's interesting for you. So I'm just going to show you an example from what Manix did. Here you can see what it looks like on the Qualtrics. So you'll get a template that we use for Manix's thesis. So this is a Qualtrics template that is already ready for you. So you'll see that in your template, you already have this coded in. And these are the kinds of questions that we are asking. So for example, Manix wanted to see what is the impact of advertising. So let's read one of the vignettes. And this is exactly the things that we talked about comparing charity A to charity B. So charities A and B help prevent deaths in children. Both of them can prevent 5 deaths for every 1,000 US dollars of donations. What's the difference? Difference on one factor only. Charity A spends $200 out of $1,000 of donations on advertising, compared to Charity B that only spends 100. Okay? Now, let's say that you have 10,000 US dollars at your disposal to allocate between Charity A and Charity B. How would you allocate this? So we give this to participants, and they can decide. It's a little bit small, so I'll just tell you. They can decide allocate 100 to A, 0 to B, 90 to A, 10 to B, 80, 20, 70, 30, 60, 40. 50, 50 means that they don't have a preference. They don't see a real difference between charity A and charity B. So what's interesting about this is that generally the effectiveness is the same. So if you look at this, both charities prevent 5 deaths for 1,000 US dollars. So generally, if people don't care about advertising, they would say 50-50. Why would I care about advertising? As long as they're the same kind of effectiveness, I pay 1,000 US dollars, I get 5 saved lives, right? But it seems like something else is happening. And when we present this to participants, this is what ends up happening. This is going to be very similar to the plot that you'll get from me. So basically, it shows you all the distribution of how people responded to this, how much they would allocate to B. 0%, 10%, 20%, 30%. If people really don't care about this, then it will be 50-50, right? They're completely oblivious to this. But as you can see here, some people indeed say 50-50, but the number one is 100% to B. So it seems like what's happening here is that people really want to avoid giving money to advertising, charities that use more advertising. How do we test this? Actually, up here on the top, you can see the statistics. It's a little bit small, but basically what the statistic is, it's a one-sample t-test. What is a one-sample t-test? A one-sample t-test assumes there's only one sample, so there's no between subject, there's no within subject, there's only one sample, there's only one question, but we have a hypothesis. And the hypothesis is that we want to compare this to whether people don't have any preference. We want to reject the hypothesis that people don't have any preference. So don't have any preference is 50-50. If we see a deviation from 50-50, then we reject the null hypothesis that people have a preference for not supporting advertisement. So what you can see over there is that we run this on about 350 participants, and you can see a p-value. It's a little bit scientific over there, but it's a very, 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 very small p-value, lower than 0.00001. And then you can see the Cohen's d, same as Hedges g. So by now, I think you have an understanding of what is the size of an effect size. So an effect size of a Cohen's d of 0.86 is considered to be quite big. Right? So this is the kind of, 349 participants. So you can see that the Hedges G is quite substantial. So it seems like there is quite a preference to avoiding advertising. So this is the kind of thing that you will do at the end. Now, what creates this, what makes this a cognitive bias is that you can think about this for a second on whether this is a good thing or a bad thing. So is it more effective that people really focus on advertising? How would we know? So if you think about this for a second, perhaps we can reframe this to think of that question in a different way. So in this question over here, we said that right now, what's happening is that they spend $200 or $100 on advertising. And the rest they spend on actually saving the lives, right? So what happens in year two? Maybe they don't need to do as much advertising. So if we reframe this, that actually, if you take away the advertising, what actually happens is that charity A only requires $800 to save the same number of people, whereas charity B requires 900. So sometimes the advertising number is a distractor. It actually makes people avoid the more important number of how much does it cost to save five lives. So if, for example, in the following year, you don't need advertisement anymore because everybody knows that charity, then actually A is more effective. So it could be that a lot of people are going to charity B, but actually they're making a mistake because actually the charity A is the more effective one. Okay. So this is a demonstration with a single question showing a cognitive bias. And we can do this with a one sample t-test. So we can show the evidence that people support B, where when we reframe this, if we show this question to participants, people are going to say, oh yeah, of course I will go for A. So if we just vary the framing between those, then we show that it goes to opposite directions. So if at the beginning you were wondering, so how is this charity A, charity B, how is this going to help me? How is this going to help the world? How is it going to help people do more charitable? So highlighting to people and to charities the kind of numbers that they need to show to people in order to increase their effectiveness is very important. In addition to this, it goes more than that. So another question that we had is about overhead. So just replace everything from advertising to overhead. So it seems like when we ask people, do you want to invest in the charity that spends more on overhead? People really don't want their money to go to bureaucracy, to managers. What they imagine is managers getting massages and all this kind of stuff. But actually, to run a successful charity, sometimes you need bureaucracy, managers, and overhead. There's no way to avoid this. So what is it that we found? It's not as big of an effect. So you can see it's a little bit more balanced. It's a little bit closer to the midpoint, and here it's 3. So 1 is all to 8, 3 is equal, and 5 is all to B. So you can see that actually there's a smaller deviation to the side. And when we look at the effect size is up here. The Hedges G is only 0.41. So it's about half of the impact of the previous one. But still, people don't want to contribute to overhead. Not as much as advertising, but they still don't want to contribute to overhead. So what is the impact of this? What can we learn from this? What can we do with this? Is there a way out of this? So it turns out that there is a way out of this, and Mannix also added another question in order to test that. What happens when we finance the overhead in a different way? So you can see here. So I'll just read this out to you. Both charities spend 50% of their donations that they receive on administrative costs. But when people donate, everything that they donate goes not to overhead, but goes to the actual charity. And all the overhead is financed by some billionaire or by some outside foundation. So it could be that if you tell people that their money is not going to overhead, their money is going to the charity, that they'll donate more. So just framing things in a different way, saying there is overhead, it's about the same kind of overhead, but if you donate, your money doesn't go to the overhead. Your money goes to what is important. Then people tend to donate more. How do we know that this is happening? Because we have a very famous science paper. So it doesn't happen very often that social psychologists or behavioral economists publish in Science, but Uri Genizi, together with his wife, Ayelet Genizi, had a science paper showing what is happening here. So this is the main figure from there. So they've actually shown that if you tell people that Bill Gates or Warren Buffett took care of all the overhead for them, then people boost their donations from a control condition of about 9,000, 10,000 US dollars to how much overhead free? 2.5 times more. Very simple manipulation. The only thing is that when you talk to the billionaires, you say, you can be a booster. If you take care of all of our management, of all the overhead, of all the advertising, then we can get the others to donate 2.5 times more. It's a very simple manipulation, but you can get a big boost. So this is a big discovery. Honestly, when I saw this kind of effect at the beginning, I was very hesitant. Is this going to replicate? Not going to replicate. But a large group of open science folks ran replications of a lot of papers in Nature and Science, and they also ran a replication of Genesi. So you can see here the science paper on all the findings that they have about financing overhead. And over here, they had a very successful replication. So it turns out it's not just by one, but also with a pre-registered replication of open science folks of this paper in Science, we concluded a successful replication. So it really seems like this is a reliable boost. Very simple manipulation. So when you have a charity and you want to increase donations, you can go to the institutional ones. You can go to Bill Gates and say, actually, you can be a booster. Do you want to be a booster? Just take care of the overhead. And then we can really tell the people that their money goes to what it is that they care about, of doing the most good. So even with a simple question of charity A versus charity B, we can gain some real insights that can really help charities in order to maximize their effectiveness and do more good in the world. Yeah. So very important. Right. How about anonymity? This is actually, we had a prediction for this and we were completely wrong because what we learned from the way that people reacted to this is very different, went in the other direction. So we actually thought, so we compared two different charities. They're about the same, but Charity A publishes the names of the donors and how much they donated on their website. Charity B keeps donors anonymous. We thought, because we were walking around HKU and we saw a building, Li Kaixing, all the big donors wanted their names on the buildings. So we thought if people donate, they want their names on the website. They want to show to people how good they are. So our prediction was that most people would like to allocate the most to Charity A. However, to our great surprise, actually, it went in the other direction. So most people decided, so a lot of 50-50, we couldn't care less, but a lot of people decided, no, we want to remain anonymous. We don't want all the action from this. We just want to do the most good. So actually, this went against our predictions. So we had a prediction. We thought it will go one way, but then we learned something from actually giving this. So even when you think about, the question that I have is intuitive. I already know what the answer is. Do you? Sometimes you really don't know. You don't know it until you test it. Okay? Very simple manipulation. It doesn't get more simple than this. A simple question, a single question. So psychology of single questions can lead to very important insights. So many people will at least like the option of remaining anonymous. So before you just assume that people want to be public and they want to advertise this on their social media, many of them don't want to. So give them that option. Okay. So very simple question that has really important insights for how charities should think about making these donations. So you can think about, is this effective or ineffective? Actually, when you ask effective altruism folks, is it better for people to remain anonymous or should people be public? Generally, in terms of effectiveness, it's better for people not to remain anonymous. Why is it better? Because people set an example, people share information. Some people might not know about your charity and how effective it is if you'll never say to others that you've actually donated. Setting an example is something very important. So some people really make jokes of social influencers on, you're just doing this for clicks and for likes. But actually, if social influencers and social media influencers can get many others to donate to that cause, that could be a good thing. Because it could be that those people would have never donated to that cause. So setting an example, sharing information, encouraging others to donate, sometimes not remaining anonymous and telling others that you've donated and to what cause you donated and why you donated is something that could be very, very impactful. So you can be a booster of the donations that you've done by telling others of what it is that you did. Okay. So I did this with Mannix. Mannix did an amazing job, but then I thought to myself, there could be so many other factors that we didn't test. So these 6 that we tested, 7, are not everything. So then I decided I'm just going to give this to the advanced social psychology course. So I'm going to crowdsource this, and this is your task 3. So we're going to do this together. I want you to bring me the best ideas that you have. The things that you think that work and the things that you might not be sure how they're going to work. Everything is good as long as it aims for the most impact. So you'll see this is what we did last year. So team project 1 and 2, they did something different. The first stage that they did is they needed to come up with these different factors. And once I gave them the data and they analyzed this, their second task was to design a charity based on these factors. So they did an incredible job. You can go and look at this. But this is what we're going to do here in the class right now. We're going to simulate this in the 20 minutes or so. So for example, I'll give you this, charity A and charity B, and I'll ask you to come out with a factor. So if we take, for example, give directly that we just discussed about giving people cash directly, then I'll ask you, okay, so you have an idea, about a charity. How would you compare this, charity A, charity B? How would you translate this to an experiment? So this is the way that I suggest of translating give directly. So for example, charity A sends money to those in need. Money can only be used for expenses that the charity pre-decided as being the highest priority on average. Whereas charity B just sends money directly to people in need. Money can be used any way the receiver sees fit. So this is one way we can take an idea of a charity that let's say give directly, and form this into an experiment to see what people will do. And actually, when we run this, we see that although Give Directly is considered to be a very effective charity and does a world of good based on randomized control trials, actually people don't like to give cash to others directly. They think of this as being misappropriated, as using for drugs, alcohol. People use this for bribes or selfish needs. So actually, Give Directly is a good example of a charity that is effective, but most people think is not. So we did a bunch of these things. There's so many different hypotheses that we ran last year. I will ask you to come up with new hypotheses that were not tested last year. So it's important that you go and have a look at what it is that they came up with. And at the end, we had this table. You can't really see this because it's very, very small, but there's a link here. We came up with 90 plus different hypotheses. So I'm going to open this just so you understand the scale of this. It's a very impressive team effort of coming out with the best hypothesis. And actually, it's a competition. So the best performing teams get a bonus. What is the best performing? The ones that identify the most impactful factors. So the bigger the effect, the better. So I just want to show you just how impactful those are. So by now you know what is a Cohen's d. So here we have the biggest one was a Cohen's d of 2.24. What was this about? Risk aversion. So people don't like to donate to charities that involve risk. They want to know that if they donate some money, it goes to where it's supposed to go, not something that is uncertain. So they really like certainty and they like to reduce risk. And this is a very big effect. We don't normally see effects of 2.24. But what's amazing about this is that the teams came up with so many good hypotheses that all the way up to, where are we here? 55 hypotheses had an effect size of over Cohen's d of over 0.5. So very substantial. So teams did a really good job. I'm really hopeful that you can come up with similar factors. So think about not only what would be cool, but what would also be impactful. What can we learn in order to inform charities and tell effective altruists? This is what you should think about. This is how you should design your charities. Okay? Is this clear? Do you understand what was done? Yeah? So I really urge you to go and learn from this, to see what kind of factors people cared about, to see this impressive effort of crowdsourcing these things. And for you, Project 3 is optional, but I really hope that some of you will take part in this because this is a real fun experiment with real life implications that people can take away and learn from. Okay? Yeah. So we found some things that are not very surprising. So risk aversion, neglectedness, people want more information and transparency, easier and better. But we also find a lot of biases. People want personal connection. People really have a very strong bias for humans and neglecting animals and nature. People have a very strong bias for in-group over out-group. So we had lots of different insights for that. So you can have a look at this. So now for the next 20 minutes, what I would like you to do is get together with your group. I hope that your groups are here. If not, you can join another group. But go scan this or go to this URL. It's a Google Doc. Actually, this is the second session, so I already had one session of advanced social psychology. So you can actually see what the other groups have done. My request from you is identify in the Google Doc one section that was not used already. It has a Team X on it. Replace Team X with the name of your team. And then work on identifying as many factors as possible, comparing charity A to charity B. So later, if you want, you can use that or not use that in your project. It's up to you, but it's for us here together to exercise this, to get an idea of how to turn ideas of charities, of factors, into comparisons of charity A, charity B for an experiment. Is this clear? Are you clear on the task? Yeah, good. So we have about 20 minutes for this. So get together with the teams, sit across from each other, face each other, start working on this, open the Google Doc, change the team name, and start mapping out the factors. 20 minutes. Okay, now that you've had like at least 5 minutes or so to think about things, and I saw you writing a lot, can you share one with the class? One that is new, that you've not seen today in the presentation, something that you came up with? Do you have something new to share with us, this group? Do you have one new factor to share with us? Yeah? Yeah? Yes, please. One. Share with us one.
Charity-based country.
The base country, where the charity comes from. Where is it based? Okay.
Charity, because we have searched some information.
Okay.
If the charity based in Southeastern Asia,
Okay.
such as Indonesia,
Okay.
that the charity is supposed to receive more fund.
Okay, so you also have a hypothesis, not just a comparison. Okay, so the country where the charity is based in, right?
Yeah.
Okay, terrific. Thank you for that. How about you guys? Do you have one new direction to share with us to inspire the others?
So there's like the surface theory where you're reciprocating to
Social exchange. Yeah.
And we're thinking when they're selling you pitch,
Mm.
give you the message or it's out.
Okay.
would have this.
Creating an expectation for reciprocity or something like that. Okay. So whether a charity gives presents when it gives a pitch, something like that. Thank you for that. Great. How about you guys? Do you have some kind of a new factor to share with us?
I think this was said already. So
Okay. Yeah, please.
Or the history of the charity. So if a charity has been around for 100 years compared to
Okay. Right.
a household compared to 100
Right. Very good. The only thing I want to add to this, so thank you for that. Reputation is a very big name, so you want to break it down. So for example, how long the charity has been around is a much more objective measure. Reputation is something very amorphic. Sometimes reputation can be received award from trusted party X, right? So when you say things like reputation, just break it apart and make sure that people understand what reputation actually means. Very good. Thank you. Or longevity, how long it's been around. How about you guys? Do you have a factor to share with us?
The ways of using money.
Ways of using money. How you donate.
I don't know. Like for charity, they just normally use the money like the other charity. But for charity B, they may collect your money and they may hire a like maybe top 1% financial expert to invest your money.
Okay. Whether it's clear in advance what the money is going for, or whether it's going to some expert who will make a decision afterwards, something like that.
To try to maximize the money by investing the money.
Oh, I see what you mean. So using the money in order to make financial investments that will use the money for good later on. Okay, interesting. Thank you for that. How about you guys? Do you have some factor for us?
Like the time.
Timing?
Yeah, it's like monthly paid to charity or yearly paid to the charity.
Okay, yeah, monthly paid or yearly paid. I think we ran this last year. Very good. Yeah. So you have a bunch of factors. Take another 5 minutes. And then we'll do, as you're doing the next 5 minutes, I want you to think about not only the new, but which one of all the things that you thought about, which one is the number one that you think is the most impactful, okay? Okay, I went over your lists, very interesting stuff. In the next 1-2 minutes, select the one that you think is the most impactful, the one that is the most important thing that people focus on, okay? Select one. Everybody go over all the lists, select one for me. Do you have the most important one, not the most novel one? What's the most impactful one that you came up with? Do you have an idea? Yeah.
I would say transparency.
Transparency?
Maybe the administrative cost for the charity.
Okay.
As well as like for advertising, I think advertising is like a big thing because people nowadays don't want the charity to spend too much money on advertising.
Okay.
So they call it like too hard sale.
Yeah. Right. Good. So the way that charities use the money, and then there's transparency, right? These two factors. Yeah. Very good. Very nice. Thank you. How about you guys? The number one most important thing? What?
Like getting confirmation or feedback that where your money is going.
Oh yeah.
Sponsor a child.
Guys, shh. Yeah.
That you get like regular updates or photos that the child is doing.
Very good. I like this. Regular updates and knowing exactly what happened with your money, right? A little bit related to transparency, but not in the way the money is used, but what happens to your money. And at the end, where did it go to and how was it used, right? Something like that. Great. Thank you very much. How about you guys? Yeah. Very good. Transparency, impact, very similar themes. Thank you very much, both of you. How about you guys? Number one most important thing of everything you've discussed?
We didn't like come up with a very clear one, but we have a few that we like to share.
A few, okay. Select two maximum.
So
short on time.
Choice of recipient demography. So you can choose
where is it going to, who the person is.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then the other is that because just now the charity, it's like they're giving up cash to people. So maybe they can like try to choose from allocating the money that they're going to donate. So maybe it's going to be all on average, but then giving less money to more recipients versus more money to less recipients.
Oh, okay. Very nice. So how the money is spread between how many people and how much, the proportion of how much each person gets. Very nice ideas. Thank you very much for that. Last group, your number one most impactful one. Which one is it?
You think it's urgency of charity issue.
Okay.
For example,
the cause, how urgent it is. Okay. Yeah. Can you give an example? Yeah.
For example, like one charity is for helping refugees after experiencing a natural disaster. That's really urgent issue.
Yeah.
And another one would be assisting people to improve environmental issues.
Environmental issues.
Yeah, it's more long term.
Long term. Very good. So whether this is a crisis that's happening now that needs urgent care or it's something later in the future that is a little bit more uncertain and amorphic, Yeah, something like that. Very good. Thank you very much. So hopefully this gives you a taste of what the third task is. I happen to think that this is a very interesting task, a very engaging task, and gives you a lot of freedom for creativity and really to test your intuitions. So I really hope that your team will decide to take a part in this. But later on, I'll actually show you that this has real life implications, and people that we've met like Lucius and like Luke actually use the insights that are gained from experiments like ours in order to do some good in the world. So we'll discuss a little bit later about how some of these insights from psychological science regarding altruism are making a big change in the world. So this is it for this week. I'll see you next week. Thank you.